Hey y'all, I'm James Wright and welcome back to Wood by Wright. Today I want to talk about chisel technique. And I've been getting quite a few questions recently about chisels, particularly do you use them bevel up or bevel down? What is the best way and why would you do it one way or the other? So let's go and take a look at this really simple tool that's really complex. So here's the thing, this is a really simple tool. It is a basic bench chisel. It's got a flat side and it's got a bevel on the top. And it seems like it's a chisel. You push it into the wood and it moves wood around, and that's basically what it does. But the big question is, do you go with the flat side or do you go with the bevel side? And is there any difference between the two? And you're probably going to have several arguments with other woodworkers because this is one of those topics that seems fairly straightforward, and most people just assume that the chisel is best used this way or is best used this way. And I want to show you a couple different methods of why. Now, I need to discuss something before we go any farther, and this is a mindset. There is a power tool mindset and there is a hand tool mindset, and they are very, very different. Though they have the same goal in mind, there's just different ways of thinking about it. The power tool woodworker generally doesn't worry about sharpening. It is something that is disposable, or if it's a really expensive tool or a really expensive saw blade, then they'll ship it out to someone who will sharpen it and ship it back to them. The hand tool woodworker, everything in the shop gets sharpened. And there's nothing here that isn't sharpenable. And so therefore, a hand tool woodworker wants a steel that's soft enough it can be sharpened, but still hard enough it holds an edge for a while. Whereas the power tool woodworker wants an edge just as hard as it possibly can be. So when it comes to the chisel, the power tool woodworker has a very logical way of thinking about it. If you put the chisel down and you use it bevel up, then when you force the chisel, you're going to be putting your force in line with the chisel. And that means your force is in line with it, it's more controllable, it's focused, and it has the logical sense of being the best way to use a chisel. On the other hand, the hand tool woodworker often looks at the chisel and says, bevel down, and that means it's up this way. And the problem with that is that your force is now going this way and the chisel is going this way. So your force is going a different direction than the chisel. And that just seems really weird and doesn't make much sense. Now, a hand tool woodworker will use the chisel in both ways, but a lot of times they will think about using it bevel down before they think about using it bevel up. Now, this argument really comes into play when you start talking about hand planes. Do you want a bevel up low angle plane, or do you want a bevel down high angle plane? And for the longest time, all planes were bevel down. That was the way it was done. Throughout history and most traditional methods, the bevel was down, and that's the way a hand tool woodworker thinks about it. The bevel up planes came about because they are a little bit better for doing end grain, and that makes it great for doing butcher blocks. And so they were kind of a one-trick pony that were for butcher blocks or having to do large chunks of end grain. And that's one of the reasons why the old Stanleys are so expensive, because they weren't very common. Woodworkers didn't use the bevel up plane, they used the bevel down plane. But then power tools came about, and most hand planes went away and sharpening techniques disappeared. And there's been a bit of a revival in the last 20 years or so, bringing back the hand tool skills. And that has brought with it the power tool mindset into the hand tool world. Now let's actually show you what I'm talking about and how that comes about. So here we have a block of wood, and for instance, I want to put a stopped dado in here. Now with a power tool, you'd stick a router and you go and you'd set up all the gauges to make sure everything doesn't move around, and then you'd come back in with the chisel and you'd clean out the corners. But if I want to do this, the power tool woodworker will come in here with the bevel down, and they'll start here and they'll kind of work in towards the gouge, and then they'll work out a little bit farther, and they'll come back a little farther. And each time they'll come back a little bit farther, but the problem is, over time, the chisel is just going to dive in. You can never bring it back level and flatten out. It just goes deeper and deeper and deeper. So you have to continuously bring this back farther. Whereas if you flip it bevel down, now you can start back here, and you can actually control it so that I can keep going along this groove in one movement. I can run a groove from one end to the other, completely freehand, just like that. Keeping it beveled down allows me to dive in deeper if I want to, or I can come up shallower. I have far more control, and so once I actually understand the chisel and know how to work it, it's no problem at all that the force isn't quite in line, because now I have more control over the chisel, and I can make the chisel do exactly what I want. Whereas keeping it beveled down, at some point I'm running into issues of it diving deeper, and I get like these notches running all the way back. Now, I don't want people to think you should always use it bevel down or always use it bevel up. The tool has many different uses in many different places. If I'm doing the face of a tin or something and I want to keep this flat all the way across, I will reference at one point, and the back is great for referencing on, as I can put it on here and then I can slide it across and make sure I get my same depth all the way across the piece and I can get a nice flat cut all the way across the board. And that's where the back is great at. Anywhere you need to reference one surface to be smooth and flat all the way across, you keep it bevel up and you can run across the board. Anytime you need to cut in, you keep it bevel down. The main thing I'm trying to say is the big difference between having it bevel up and bevel down is more or less which are you more comfortable with. And there are a lot of cases where you really should use it bevel up. That's the best place. And there are a lot of cases where you really should use it bevel down. But for those in-between places that you could use it either way, which way are you going to hold it? If you keep it bevel up, that has the mindset that you want the tool to reference the surface and you want the tool to be a jig. If you keep it beveled down, that means that you want to be in control and you want to have the chisel doing what you want it to do, not what the jig tells it to do. And that's really the big difference between power tool and hand tool mindset. The power tool woodworker wants a jig to make sure the work is done perfectly, and all the work is spent creating the jig, setting up the fences, and making sure that everything runs through it well. Once the fences are set up, then any monkey can run the work through the tool. With the hand tool mindset, the jigs and fences and things like that are just more work, and you're relying more on your skill of the tool than your skill of setting up the jigs. So using it beveled down means that you have a better chance of messing up because the tool can go all over the place. But it also means that you get to exercise your skill and you get to learn the tool and how the tool works. And that right there is the big difference between the power tool mindset and the hand tool mindset. Now, I really don't want this to feel like there's one way that is better than the other. There really isn't. Both are perfectly good. The power tool mindset of setting up jigs and fences and relying on the flat to drive the plane along, that is very useful, especially when you're first getting started. It will guarantee you get a much better outcome. But in that case, you are putting your skill into the fences and jigs and what is required to complete the task. In the hand tool world of putting the bevel down, now the skill is on you, the woodworker, because you are the one in control and this is an extension of you. It's not an extension of the fence and the jig and the guide that are all set up. And in that case, the skill is more in your hand and how the tool works. So one is not better than the other. Getting the jigs and fences, those are fantastic for the beginner to get some good results and get into it. But if you're still relying on those fences and jigs, you're not actually learning the skill of how to use the tool. So maybe you should try using it bevel down every now and then and start to learn the tool and what it feels like and how you have more control over it, and you can do some amazing things when you are the one with the skill and not the fence and jig. Now, I know this is going to start a lot of arguments, and let me know your thoughts down below. Just keep them nice, keep them clean, and keep them constructive. Let's figure this out together and help each other out along the way. And maybe I'll do a video here soon against bevel up versus bevel down planes. Now there's a good argument. So I hope you like this slightly different topic. I know I got a little philosophical in here, but it is really the basic tool of the shop. And once you get your mind around the bevel up, bevel down, and understand that, a whole lot of other things in the shop start to make sense. So I play around with it and see what comes out of that. So if you did like the video, please hit like, comment, share, subscribe, ring the bell, become a patron, click join down there. All those things really do help out the channel, and thank you for that. That means a lot to me. So I think that's about it for now. And until next time, have a wonderful day. I had a police officer friend the other day who didn't get out of bed until 3 p.m. and I asked him why was that. And he said, well, I'm an undercover cop.